Welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over section 1.7, which is about decimals. Fortunately, people typically find working with decimals a little bit easier than working with fractions. The downside, and what I need to tell you about this section, is that this section covers a lot of different topics all in one. So the basic definitions of decimals, how to read and write them in words, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It's all in rounding, it's all in here. So take a look, make sure that you're reading the book in addition to watching the videos. And if there's some aspect of this that you need more help with, then let me know and we will get you the help that you need. Okay, so the big idea for decimals is that like fractions, we have a way of expressing things that are less than one whole. And the kind of consistent thing about decimals is that everything is based on tens or multiples of tens. So we take the usual number line that we have, or the place value system that we have, rather, ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, and so on. And then we add in our decimal point that we're familiar with, and then start adding in place values to the right of that. So if you take 1 and divide it by 10, you get 1/10. Which is 0.1. And then if you divide that by 10, you get 1/100th, which is 0.01. And then 1,000, 0.001, 10 thousandths, and then 100 thousandths, and then millions, and so on. So each step to the right corresponds to a division by 10, just as when we're in whole numbers. If you have 10 thousands, one digit to the right is thousands, which is divided by 10. To divide 1,000 by 10, you get hundreds, and so on. As far as the place values, you'll notice that all of the ones that are to the right of the dot, that is all the ones for small numbers, things less than 1, you'll notice that they all have that TH in them, thousandths, 10 thousandths, and so on. Whereas the ones for whole numbers have no TH sound. So would you rather have $1,000 or $1,000? Okay, so most all of us, I think, would rather have $1,000 than $1,000. Okay, so you got to listen kind of carefully to hear that. Okay, so that is kind of the basics about how digits or numbers with decimals work. One other thing that you have to kind of be careful of in working with decimals is it's kind of asymmetric with respect to the position around the decimal point. That is here, if we have this number, this 2 pointed to by the arrow is in the tens place. Notice that it's 2 digits to the left of the dot. But the tenths place is 1 digit to the right of the decimal point. That doesn't match up. And that's because we have a ones place, okay, that is directly to the left of the dot. And that pushes over, I guess, the tens place. We don't have a once, right, to the left of the tenth, so it's not going to match up. Similarly, if you have 507 and then a dot and then 768, the 5 here is in the hundreds place. And then the 6 on the right side is in the hundredths place. Okay, so be careful of that as you're, especially when you're working with rounding and you need to know what decimal place you're in. Okay, so the best way to go through the rest of this is by trying examples of everything. So we're going to do that. So the first part, it says name and write decimals. We're going to write each number as a decimal. So we'll try several of these. So we have 29 and 81 hundredths. So the and is where the decimal point goes. So we'll say 29.81, 29 and 81 hundredths. 6/10ths as a fraction would look like that. We're doing it as a decimal though, so we'll have a dot and we'll put a 6 in the tenths place. And it'd be probably kind of nice to put a 0 in front for the whole numbers, just so that it just looks nicer. Okay, -11, and is where the dot goes, 9 10,000ths. So we got to figure out where the 10,000ths are going to go. Okay, this is the tenths place, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So that's going to be 9 10,000ths. I put the underlines there to help me mark off spots to make sure I get the 9 in the right place. And then to hold the place, I'll put in zeros as placeholders. And let me double check to make sure I didn't mess that up. The first 0 is in the tenths, then hundreds, thousandths, 10,000ths. So negative 11.0009, negative 11 and 9 10,000ths. Okay, let's try a few more. 35 thousandths. Here's the dot. The thousandths place is 3 digits to the right of the decimal point. That's where the 5 for the 35 will have to go. And so again, we're going to need a 0 to hold a place to ensure that that 5 ends up in the thousandths spot. Okay, negative 59 and 2 10,000ths. Okay, like the 537 that we did a bit ago, the 2 10,000ths place will have to be the 4th digit to the right of the decimal. Okay. In the next group, we're going the other direction. Basically, we're given numbers and we're to name them. So 539 will be 5 and 5/10ths. 542 is 2 and 64/100ths. 540 will be 14 and 2 whats? 2, that's in the hundredths place. That's 200ths. Okay. 544 is 479 thousandths. 541 is 8 and 71/100ths. Okay, if you need more help in going back and forth between words and decimals, let me know. In the next part, we're working with decimals and rounding. We did rounding involving whole numbers earlier in the chapter. Here we're doing the same basic thing. It's just that now we have decimal places. Okay, so in this first group, we're rounding each number to the nearest 10th. So let's see how that will go. For the first one, 0.67 or 67/100ths. If we're rounding this to the nearest 10th, then that will be where the 6 is now. The digit 7 to the right of it is more than 5, so we're rounding up, and so we will have 0.7. You can put 0.70 if you want, because it's going to be the same thing. 4.63 on the other hand, the 6 is still in the 10th place. The 3 to the right is less than 5, so we will not be rounding up. We'll just leave that as 4.6 or 4.60 if you like. For 0.49, that will round to 0.50 or 0.5 if you wish. In the next group, we're rounding to the nearest hundredth. So 551, that's 0.845. The 5 is in the thousandths place. We're trying to round to the nearest hundredth. And so when it's 5, that's exactly halfway between. The custom is to round up. So we'll call that 0.85. For 0.697, also we're rounding this one to the nearest hundredth. But that hundredth place is already a 9, and so we're going to have to actually change our tenths digit as well. That'll be 0.70. Okay, let's do a couple more of these because those last few were a little tricky. 0.761, there we're rounding down. It will be 0.76. 4.098, if we're rounding that to the nearest hundredth, again, notice that the hundredths digit is a 9 already, so we're going to have to go up to the next higher tenth. So that will be 4.1 for that. Okay, 2.299 or 299 thousandths, that will be 3/10ths or 30/100ths if you want. And then 7.096 will be 7.10 again. Okay, and in the last part for the rounding, we're rounding each number to the nearest hundredth, tenth, and whole number. So let's do 558. 1.6381 to the nearest hundredth. To the nearest hundredth, that's where the 3 is now. The digit to the right is an 8, and so we'll be rounding up. That will be 1.64. That's to the nearest hundredth. If we want to round to the nearest tenth, though, the digit in the tenth place is a 6. The digit to the right of that is a 3. So we'll be rounding off, not up, if you like. And so that's just 1.6. Okay, lastly, we're going to the nearest whole numbers. You have to ask yourself, 1.63, is that closer to 1 or 2? It is more than 1.5, and so we'll round that up to 2, just a solid 2. That takes us to the end of our bit on rounding. Again, if you need more help with rounding, let me know. Okay, addition and subtraction are next. So the big rule for addition and subtraction with decimals is that the numbers have to be aligned at the decimal point. When you're working with whole numbers, you can just slam them all to the right and they're automatically aligned. When you have digits behind the decimal point, because there's a variable number of digits behind a decimal point, just right adjusting them like that is not going to do. So you need to align the numbers at the decimal point to ensure that when you're adding and subtracting, you're combining the same place values. So in this example, we would be adding 8/10 and 3/10 together because they're both tenths. We're adding 400s and 800s together because they're both hundreds. In order to ensure we're adding like place values together, align the numbers at the decimal point. If you don't, then you do weird stuff like adding 3 10s to 9 1s, right? And they're not the same thing, so you can't combine them. Align your numbers at the decimal point. Okay, if you've got that down, doing addition and subtraction with decimals is not too tough, because it amounts to combining the numbers just as you would if they were whole numbers. So let's try 563, which is 21 and 76/100ths. And we're going to subtract from that 30 and 99 hundredths. So here, if these were whole numbers, then we would have to borrow for sure, right? So we'll take that 7, we'll lower it to a 6, and bring over 10. That makes 16. 16 minus 9 is 7. To do 6 minus 9, I can't do that either. We're going to have to borrow once again. So I'll look to the right, turn that 1 into a 0, and bring over 10 tenths as it is. We'll have 16 again. 16 minus 9 is going to be 7. And then 0 minus 0 is 0. And then here, look, we've got 21 minus 30. So I should have paid better attention to the beginning before I just started into this thing, because we're doing basically 21 minus 30. So I need to come up with a different plan than this. When you run into trouble like this, when you're working with decimals also, you want to think about, how would I do this if this were just whole numbers? If it were 21 minus 30, we would be figuring out 21 plus negative 30. And in order to do that, we end up subtracting 30 minus 21, right? You subtract their absolute values. So that's what I should be doing right here. Okay, so let me try this again a little more carefully. We'll have 30.99 minus 21.76. And mercifully, there's no borrowing this way, right? 9 minus 6 is 3. 9 minus... Sorry, Zoom crashed on me again. So sorry, I'm not sure how far back that was, so let me just repeat quickly. We had 30.99, we're subtracting from it 21.76, that left 9.23. But in the original problem, we were doing 21 minus 30, so we should end up with negative 9.23. Okay, so what's important, of course, is to make sure that when you're adding or subtracting, you keep those decimal points aligned. So let's do 1, maybe 2 more of those. For negative 19.47 minus 32.58, if these were whole numbers or integers, if I was doing negative 19 minus 32, we'd add them, right? We would make that negative 19 plus negative 32, right? And then we'd end up with a negative 51. Right, so we're going to do that. So we're going to add basically their absolute values and have a negative sum. 19.47, 32.458. Okay, keeping the decimals aligned, that will give us 15 and 10. That's one more, 10, 12. And it looks like 52.05, but then it's going to be negative, right? Okay, so that takes us to the end of 566. Let's do 575. This one, 575, is interesting because the first number has 2 digits behind the decimal and the second one has only 1. So once again, we have to be careful to align our numbers at the decimal point. We have 55.01 minus 3.7. So if you like, you can add in a 0 after the last non-zero digit after the decimal point, and that may help you keep things aligned. So now I've got 55.01 minus 3.70. So then in order to get this done, I will need to borrow. This will give us 51.31. In the end. So in here, you do want to make sure that when you're adding and subtracting that you are aligning the numbers at the decimal points. If you get it all stuck because like some of them are negative or something and you're trying to figure out what to do, you could just turn the numbers into integers real quick to think about how you would do it, come up with a plan, and then execute that plan with the actual decimals. For example, 3.84 minus 6.1, this would be like 4 minus 6, right? However you would do 4 minus 6, you're going to do the same thing with the decimals. So how you might do this is say, well, this would be 4 plus negative 6. To do that, we'll subtract their absolute values. And then the number with the bigger absolute value is the negative 1, negative 2. So that's my plan. So here we'll take 6.1, we'll subtract from it 3.84. Okay, and then so once again, we will need to do some borrowing in order to achieve this. So let's do that. I don't know about you, but I don't care for borrowing much. But that's okay. We can do it even if we don't like it. All right, so negative, it's going to be 2.16, the difference, but then again, it's going to be negative 2.16. All right, that takes us to the end of the first part on working with decimals. We saw the basics of reading and writing decimals and rounding and addition and subtraction. In the next part, we will work on multiplication and division. In the meantime, let me know if you have any questions, and then have a great day.